some long while ago, the question was often asked, what is it that's present when stillness and movement meet? And this in turn has brought us back to a sublime paradox that was introduced even before this question was asked. And that sublime paradox is, how do we reconcile, how do we solve the paradox of having arrived and being in a perpetual state of becoming? And last week it was spoken of and a question was asked, what is the Dharma? And it was encouraged to maybe inquire after this, the history of what the Dharma means. But if you don't mind, today it's a personal story, and perhaps you might be able to answer the question for me. Is this the Dharma? Some of you already know parts of this story, but at age 24, after a series of personal choices which were disasters, I had what I'd learned later was an epiphany, or an experience of oneness, so called. And for the next 23 years, I tried to reclaim this experience permanently through practices and knowledge, but unsuccessfully. But then in Hawaii, I was introduced to one we called the Divine Mother. I was introduced to her by my neighbor, who was Japanese, as was Divine Mother herself. But the first time I went into Divine Mother's presence, she said to me, I'm not going to give you it all at once, you'll have to come back. So I went back a second time to visit her, and she allowed me to experience that state of oneness that I'd experienced those long years before. So I was ecstatic. The first thing that came to my mind was, I've arrived! My God, I've arrived! But after several weeks of euphoria, I suddenly thought, well, what now? I've arrived. So what? What happens now? And as it was, I was living in Hawaii on a dependence visa because my husband was posted there. So our time in Hawaii was going to be limited, usually to 3 or 4 years duration. So there had been no thought, even though it was known that Divine Mother had groups and meditation gatherings, there was no thought that there would be a possibility or a likelihood that I would join those groups, thinking that I would be leaving Hawaii at any time. But then one day, after those several visits to Divine Mother, I was having tea with my neighbor, and somehow, from somewhere, I was thumping the table to her saying, they don't know who she is. I didn't even know who they were. I'd never met any of those people who'd gone to meditation. I didn't know any of them. I didn't know any of these groups. And here I was thumping the table saying they don't know who she is. So my friend and neighbor, who'd been with Divine Mother those 13 years or so, she went back to Divine Mother and told her. And Divine Mother said, well, she can come and tell them. I was 46 years old. I'd never told a story in my life. And when I went and started to go to be with Divine Mother at her meetings, she had me sitting beside her. And she would elbow me. You can say something now. And out came stories. And that was the beginning of the next, whatever it is. How old am I now? Been telling stories ever since then. So the question that's asked of you is, would you consider this the Dharma? Would you consider this place of having the awareness of having arrived and then all of a sudden becoming? Because this storytelling, as many of you are experienced and as has already been said, is like an endless chain. So if we look at it, we would have to call it a becoming, because it does have a thread. I don't know what the thread is. I've got no mandate to bring anyone to anywhere. I just tell stories. They do what they do. So, what do you think? Is this the Dharma? Is this what we understand the Dharma to be? Is it like stillness and movement? When they meet in us, something else is brought forth. Something else emerges, a state of being. What do you think about this? Is it this point where we acknowledge and say, I've arrived, and yet there's an unfolding, unknown, unbidden, just arising, that continues endlessly? I can't see the end of these stories. I don't know where they come from. Where do they lead to? So, in that sense, there seems to be that endless becoming. So is it necessary for this awareness? I've arrived, accepting, or as has been said, knowing who and what we are. And then life goes on. Is this the Dharma? Would you say? If not, it is suggested that we explore this. When we look at the history of the word Dharma, its origins, and how it's evolved through the various persuasions, we can recognize something in ourselves that can grasp, acknowledge what it is. Not because we've read in the books, oh, this is a truth. It's something that we acknowledge within ourself. It's like that little story of the Pandit that makes a mandate with God. The beloved, it's a Sufi story, that he's going to go out into the town square and he's going to give a dissertation every day of his life. And at first he goes out and many people come and they listen to his dissertations. But then it starts to taper off and nobody comes. So he stops going out to the town square. And then one day he meets an old lady who maybe is Kuan Yin in disguise. as these things happen. And she scolded him roundly. You made a mandate with God that you were going to stand in the town square and give a dissertation every day of your life. And now you've stopped. Where's your mandate? So he started going out to the town square again, whether anyone came or not. Do you hear what's being said here? What is this Dharma? Not a mandate, not a calling from God that says you have to do this. Something that arises out of this meeting place of an acknowledgement of having arrived and yet living a life where there is an unfolding, a becoming that continues endlessly. Like that old Taoist saying, to drop the mind and the body, and the mind and the body of all others, till no trace of enlightenment remains, and that no trace continues endlessly. Is this the Dharma? What do you think?
It reminds me of the universe. From astronomers' point of view, like 100 years ago, the Milky Way was the universe. And every day now, they're finding a new end of the universe. It just keeps going.
Right. Right. So what is this Dharma?
It depends on what you understand as being arrived at. Because there's an understanding of I can arrive at this point that you understand. But perhaps your ultimate arrival point is way beyond that, what you can understand. And so when you arrive at this point, wherever you're going to go next is unknown to you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just a matter of keeping on going and being surprised at every moment, seeing where you are going and what's going to happen.
But what about if we don't acknowledge that we've arrived? Where are we? I know where I was at. Driven. Tortured. What is it? Not this, not this, not this. What is it in us that knows that we've arrived?
It's the state.
All right. Absolutely. No question, no doubt. Not coming from a mind. Circumstances of life, yes, we need that. But what is it in us? Find out what the Dharma is first, and then we have a possibility of diving deeper and to find out where it comes from. Thank you.